I've never been a big fan of certain sports teams, but I did have an exception in the mid 2000s. That was the San Diego Superchargers with this man, Shawne Merriman, the most feared defensive player in the league at the time, and they had the best pound for pound running back for my money of all time in LaDainian Tomlinson. So it's a pleasure to have you join me. But we're not going to be talking about the gridiron today. We're going to be talking about the cage. You've become a fight promoter. You got Lights Out XF 11 this Saturday. So tell me about how you got into the fight promotion business and how you basically fell in love with MMA about 10 plus years ago.
Yeah, we had a huge fight this Saturday in Long Beach, California. Lights Out Xtreme Fighting 11. Anybody that's looking for more information, you can go to lightsoutxf.com. We'll be live on Fubo TV, Fubo Sports. So if you guys don't have Fubo, get it. And to be honest, man, I got into this sport because I just wanted to get, be a better football player. I was working out with my friend Jay Glazer at his gym from Fox Sports. And he said, I think that MMA would help you out with football, using your hand-eye coordination anyway. I did it. I showed up the next day, started training with Randy Couture. That was my first day in the MMA gym. And every offseason, I would just work and train with a lot of these MMA guys. And I finally ended up launching Lights Out Xtreme Fighting in 2019.
So what about fighting did you gravitate towards in terms of the sport itself?
Well, there's no penalties. I think the biggest thing is that when you're looking for a competitive edge in football, you want to do everything possible to become the best player you can. And I saw that when I started training MMA, my hand-eye coordination just got a lot better. My stamina, I was able to be a better pass rusher, a lot more nimble, a lot more flexible. And so those things helped me be a better football player. But more importantly, I think a lot of former athletes should be transitioning into some kind of combat sport. You hear all these stories about guys, kind of struggling, finding that second part of their life. And it just, for me, it gives me an opportunity to stay disciplined. I still nowadays, I spar, once or twice a week. I work out with my fighter sometimes to kind of stay in shape. So it keeps me going.
I've always been surprised that we don't see mixed martial arts coaches or gyms actively recruit at the NFL Combine. I mean, there are hundreds of players that come out for it. Only a handful of them are going to get drafted and end up on NFL teams. Why not plant that seed early and say, hey, come down to the gym and see if this is something you like? I mean, these are national athletes from Division II, Division III colleges that I think could make a great transition over to mixed martial arts if they got in early enough.
You're absolutely right. And that's why I'm here. That's why I got into this business. I see a lot of correlation with guys who finish early. I was a young guy when I retired. I was 28 years old, and I still could have fought if I would have put my mind to it and put the effort to doing it. But there's a lot of guys that don't have that opportunity. They may get cut, they may get injured, and they still physically fit and want to compete in something, but they have nothing to compete in. So we're seeing a lot of former athletes, Le'Veon Bell, Frank Gore, Adrian Peterson, a lot of these guys. Greg Hardy had a short stint in the UFC there. We're seeing a lot of these former athletes that's still capable of competing. And so what we try to do with Lights Out Xtreme Fighting is just give them a platform to show them how to make that transition easier.
Well, I think especially at heavyweight, like Greg Hardy, as much as I think a lot of people dismissed him, he was basically a top 20 heavyweight in the UFC for a time. He was winning a lot of fights. Obviously he had a bit of a history, and that always kind of carried with him. But at the same time, I think if you get some of these bigger guys, get them into fight shape, I think a lot of them could make some noise at heavyweight. You see Julian Lane right now in the UFC. He's now there, a former Jacksonville Jaguar, not a guy that had a very long football career, but like you said, if you're going to be retiring or you can't make an active roster, whether it's the XFL, CFL, NFL in your mid-20s, I think it's a viable path for a lot of guys.
No question about it. And believe it or not, there's a lot more guys that want to get involved, that want to do it, but they don't know the transition stage and how to do it, what coaches to go to, how to sign up for an amateur fight. They don't know the pathway. And so I've been around this sport for 17 years. And I was fortunate when I retired, I got straight into TV with NFL Network, Fox Sports, ESPN, and back to Fox Sports. So I understood TV, production, and how those things go. But I also, in the midst of the business side of things, I still trained. And I was around a lot of fighters, helping a lot of young fighters kind of, understand their brands and how to navigate their path in this sport. And so you're absolutely right. There are tons of guys that will not have an opportunity to play at the next level. And even if they do, it's only a couple of years, and they're still looking to compete. And we want them all to come over to Lights Out Xtreme Fighting.
And how big of a fan of the sport are you in terms of watching it? Are you a guy that watches it on Saturday nights or records it, watches it the next day. What's your, I guess, viewership like when it comes to watching mixed martial arts?
I call it my two F's, football and fighting. I get to fighting and football on the same weekend. Obviously, I'm being removed from the game. You never really stop being a football fan. You see all these up and coming pass rushers, defensive guys, these great quarterbacks. But also too, I'm always looking at what's next in the fight game. Up and coming stars, like we have the next up and coming superstars. These guys, and it's fun for me to be here because I see them on that journey before the rest of the world knows how much of a star they are. So I see them as they come up. I see them in the weigh-ins. I see them train. So it's fun for me to see that that early stage Conor McGregor, that early stage John Jones or Ronda Rousey, Amanda Nunes. So it's fun for me to see these up and comers and kind of bring them along through Lights Out Xtreme Fighting.
And who have you seen in California, for example, that has kind of come up from the ground floor to becoming a star in the UFC?
Yeah, we have about 3 or 4 people in this card that we have Saturday coming up in Long Beach. For Albert Morales, who's our main event fighting Musa Talibar, he actually had a short stint in the UFC. He could be a guy that eventually ends up back there, have opportunity. Tommy Aaron, we have a former football player, A.J. Hodgkins, that played linebacker at Oregon. He's making his debut with us. It's his second or third amateur fight. But this guy's going to be a star. He knows it. He gets it. He trains like he's still on the football field. And I think he's going to come out and put on a show on Saturday.
And what's promoting an event like? What goes? How involved and hands-on are you? Are you signing the contracts? Are you putting the deals together? Like, what's your role in the promotion? Obviously, it's got your nickname on it, so I imagine you're probably pretty heavily invested.
Everything. Everything's the answer to that. Anything from the matchmaking, which I have a great team of people that I brought in. But as far as the sponsorship, matchmaking, promoting, marketing, contracts, venue, venue partnerships, you name it. I'm pretty much behind the scenes doing everything. And I wouldn't want to do anything else in the world, man. I was fortunate enough to play in the NFL, had the career that I had, even though it was cut short with some injuries. I played at the highest level, and then you move on and transition to your other passion that you had in life, and that's combat sports. And to be around these young guys, you talk to any former athlete, any former NFL player, the first thing they'll tell you is they missed the locker room. And for me, I never really missed the locker room as much because I'm back in the locker room around these guys a lot, and it's helpful. And I try to encourage a lot of former athletes to just pick up some combat sport and get back in it, stay disciplined, stay active.
If you could pluck one player from the NFL that doesn't have any fighting experience and predicted they would be a future champion one day, and you could put them in Lights Out and you could build them from the ground up, which player would that be? They're going to say yes. I'm not saying they have to think about walking away from whatever $100 million contract, but they're saying yes in this instance.
I'm taking a guy like Aaron Donald. We see him with the hand combat drills in the offseason. I think he walks around and play around 285. So he can drop 25 or 30 pounds in a second once he loses that football weight. TJ Watt, a tall guy that's long. He can drop some weight and, hit people and kick people from a distance. A Khalil Mack, right, from the Chargers. Look, trust me, when I watch football games on Sunday, the first thing that comes to my mind is, man, can those guys fight? Can they fight? That's always my attitude now, even when I'm watching NFL on Sundays.
And which guys do you work with in the offseason? Are there any NFL players that come and work with you? And Jay Glazer, I know he's been very involved in getting a lot of these NFL players to try out combat sports.
Yeah, I see a lot. A guy that I know is very, very good in the cage and MMA and jiu-jitsu is Mercedes Lewis. I talk to him a lot about it. I've trained with him, trained with Richie Incognito. Clay Matthews is also a guy who can go. So there's tons of guys out here who actively. My former teammate Quentin Jammer, who does jiu-jitsu right now. But there's tons of guys out here that are actively training in some kind of combat sport. And I talk to them all the time and say, look, if you want to think about it and you want to, kind of over here and stay active and see what you got, let me know.
Yeah, I know you mentioned that there's no penalties in MMA, but I feel like Richie Incognito could still get disqualified from a fight if he went into MMA. I'm just saying. I feel like he would gouge someone's eyes or something like that. I mean, that's a guy that I think a lot of people would be afraid to stand across the cage from.
Oh, no doubt about it. Richie will find a way to get kicked out the cage as he did on the field. So he's a great dude, man, good friend of mine. Hell of an athlete. You would think that someone's that big is not as mobile and as agile as he is. And I just remember watching him training, man. I'm like, that dude is a beast. And look, there's tons of big guys. And mind you, if you look at a lot of these offensive linemen when they retire, what happens? They shrink down. Some of these guys lose up to 50 pounds. Nick Harwood, one of my former teammates, was a center. He played around 300 pounds. He's walking around at 220. So there's tons of guys that, especially offensive and defensive linemen, that will make that transition pretty easy.
Tommy Harris is the one that freaked me out the most. Like, that guy was close to 3 bills in the NFL, and you see him walk around, he's thin. He's like 175 pounds or something like that.
Yeah, because, look, even me, I stay in shape. I'm not the size that I was when I played. But, with all of us, we like to stay active because that's what we know. We have a regimen since we were 11 years old, and all of a sudden, someone come and ask for your playbook and you're done. So you don't have you have a chance to go and show that you still got it. So a lot of these guys, what they do is when they make that transition over, man, they lose that football weight. A lot of us are big, strong, and stiff, so they get over there and they find a way to be a lot more loose, a lot more comfortable in the cage. And I invite them all, man. I want to see more and more former athletes, man, get this opportunity to come over here.
Well, how about yourself? I mean, you were signed to a bare knuckle promotion, and I think something went wrong with that. I believe you sued them, if I recall correctly. Are you still looking to potentially take a fight? You're 38 years old. Is that something that you hope to do at some point? Is that on your bucket list?
You know what? I spar, once or twice a week. I love to stay in shape. If the opportunity presented itself, if I knew that people wanted to see it, it was a big enough fight where people want to, buy it, and if we can entertain the people and put on a great show, absolutely. But I really do get a lot of enjoyment and pleasure, man, in promoting these next up and coming guys. I felt that, I was fortunate enough to build such a platform because I played, football, played in the NFL to now get transitioning some of these, football eyeballs over to MMA. But if the opportunity presented itself, I'm not knocking it. I'm not walking away from it. And if the people and the fans wanted to see it, I would make it happen.
What do you think is a trait that a lot of these fighters have that other pro athletes don't have? Like, if you look at a lot of the athletes that are in the NFL, NBA, etc., they all have incredible heart and they're incredible competitors. But is there something that you believe fighters have that these athletes don't have and that isn't teachable?
Well, for one, they're all crazy. That's for one. But the second part of that is, there's something about a fighter's mentality, man. When you close that cage, it's just you and the person across from you. There's no timeouts. There's no coaches that's going to jump in there and substitution. So you've got to you have a different kind of mindset when you come to this sport. And probably, which is why I never really jumped in there yet. I've sparred champions and great fighters and stuff like that before. But unless you're really ready to get in there, because that person across from you wants to cause harm, he wants to do damage. And so fighting is not something you can go, you try to play football, try to play basketball. You don't try to play fighting. It's just one of those things you don't do.
Do you think we'll ever see a players association, so to speak? Like, you have the NFLPA, of course, but do you think that the fighters will ever organize in such a fashion? I know Randy Couture, who you've worked with in the past, is somebody who I believe tried to get this together at some point in time.
Yeah, it may happen. But it's, it's a little difficult because it's such an independent sport. It's not like the teams of the NFL, NBA, or Major League Baseball or anything like that because you have a team for that. With these guys, man, there's a lot of it's a brutal sport. It's violent. It's very individual, and you have a rotating door of fighters that come in and out all the time. So I believe it will happen at some point. I don't know how soon or how later, but I'm not totally against it being that way.
What do you think is the thing that's stopping it? Like, well, why don't you think it's happened? Yeah, you talk about how dangerous the sport is. Of course, if you have an association, you can fight for things like a pension, long-term health benefits, etc.
Yeah, because it really is. It's such a brutal sport, and long-term contracts are probably only given out from the bigger leagues like a UFC or so forth. I mean, a lot of the regional promotions, even down to the local promotion, these guys may be one-offs. Kind of a revolving door of fighters. So it's hard to kind of structure something where you're talking about insurance, you're talking about pensions and things like that, because a lot of these guys would come and take a fight or two and be done. I mean, you have some, believe it or not, you have some guys that go try this thing out, maybe have a fight or two, and never touch a cage again. And so to put a pension and those things in place, it becomes difficult.
Well, this event is in California, and I believe a portion of the ticket sales do go into fighters' pensions, specifically in the state of California.
Yeah. I was actually just talking to Andy Foster, who's the California Athletic Commission. athletic commission. And so we love that, man. Look, I'm a former player. I know what these guys go through in their training camps and injuries and beat downs. I mean, some of these guys are working full-time jobs still, 8-hour shifts, and still finding a way to get in the gym twice a day. I mean, it's pretty rough. And that's why I have such a tremendous amount of respect for these fighters because there's a lot of things that's not in place for them, and they're trying to find their way. They're trying to make a way for themselves, and so I have a tremendous amount of respect for them.
Well, it is fight week for you. What is the biggest headache that you experience during fight week as a promoter?
Hey, well, the promote. It's funny. We talked about just wearing a lot of hats, right? Yes, I'm promote the fight, I market it. I'm the investor. I'm the sponsorship guy. I'm the coordinator when it comes to everything. My hands are pretty much everything that goes on, and I would say this week, right, because it's fight week, it gets hectic with commission and medicals. You might have a fight or 2 or 3 that might drop out because of accidental headbutt or a guy had a suspension that we didn't know about in another state. There's a lot that go on behind the scenes. Our production is in house. Everything we do production wise, and we kind of send everything over to Fubo. So there's a lot of moving and shaking, especially when you're talking about a week or 2 out from the fight.
Yeah, I worked for a regional promotion as a commentator, and I was at the weigh-ins probably in the last month, and you have a guy weighing 10 pounds over. One guy's medicals aren't done. They're trying to switch guys. This guy's going to fight this guy now. They're going to get it approved by the commission. The promoter there is just calm. He's smiling. I guess it was the 51st show, Unified 51. So, I mean, or Unified 52, actually. So, this isn't his first rodeo. He's used to this kind of thing, but it's just crazy to be in the room and seeing all of these things happening all at the same time, like a day before the fights are supposed to happen.
That's so fun. I'm so glad you said that. And until you experience what that chaotic and how hectic it is, especially fight week and weigh-ins, and you got the commissions there and the checks off, and this guy missed weight, you're trying to figure it out. I mean, it's hard to explain to the audience out there, the people listening, but it is a hectic, chaotic business. And the reason why that promoter was smiling is because it happens every fight. And so you get used to it. You survive in advance, and you make it happen, man. And when things like that happen, you just get enjoyment out of fixing it. I love fixing problems and figuring things out, man. That's one thing I do love about this business.
Well, it is this Saturday. If you go to lightsoutxf.com, and I've got to say, if you like the UFC, if that's the only thing you watch, and you live in an area where there's regional MMA, you got to go and check out a show, because if you get 2 fighters that are of equal level against each other, you're always going to get to see great fights, and you don't get a better seat than what you get at a regional promotion compared to the UFC. I mean, you could be up in the nosebleeds paying $400 for a ticket, or you could be sitting at a table cage side for whatever, $100 or $150, whatever it is, and you won't get an experience like that. Even though it's a bigger show and their fighters are more familiar with, I guarantee if you go to a regional event, there's nothing like it.
Absolutely, and that's what got me into it. Obviously, I was going to the UFC back in 2005. When I got drafted by the Chargers, was my first UFC event. I started to go to more and more. I got to the sport, local and regional shows. I used to go to local shows and just look at guys, look at the setup. As you said, you don't like this fight we have coming up. There's real bad blood by a lot of big name guys in Southern California, and that we wanted to make sure that we made that happen because these guys got a lot of supporters, their friends, their gyms, coaches, managers. We're locked and loaded on Saturday. Trust me.
So again, that's lightsoutxf.com to buy tickets, and it's on Fubo TV if you want to check out the broadcast. If you want to see some of the previous events, they're on YouTube. So make sure you get familiar with this promotion. Shawn, thank you so much for doing this, and best of luck with the event Saturday. I'm sure it'll go great.
You got it, man. Thanks for having me.